All right, my name is Daniel Davis. I'm presenting the project that I've been working on for the past 2 years, titled Beyond Excited and Anxious, Student Influences and Emotions Towards Their Career Search. So the bulk of this presentation is looking at these two things. The influences on students, what are the factors that lead them to pick certain careers over others, as well as their emotions towards the impending job hunt as they get closer to graduation. We know that it's an exciting time and a kind of scary or anxious time, but more concretely, what are the emotions students feel? How intensely do they feel those emotions? And so that's what we were exploring. So we surveyed SDSU undergrads, and we surveyed nearly 2,437. We surveyed or emphasized juniors and seniors because they are the ones closest to that job hunt after college. And also conducted 206 interviews to get more qualitative data. The dependent variable is the emotion students feel towards their career search. When you're doing research, there is typically a set of independent variables and a dependent variable. The independent variables are the ones that are unlikely to change, and we want to know how those impact the dependent variables, the ones we want to see if there's variation based on different categories of the independent variables. So the one that I was most looking at to see if it changes is this dependent variable. And I measured it both qualitatively and quantitatively. So qualitatively, we asked students in the survey to give us the top 3 emotion words they feel when they think about their future job hunt. And so we collected those words. And then we took another batch of 100 undergrads, and we took all the words we gathered from our survey, thousands and thousands of them, and there's many of them repeat. Almost 400 unique words were used, and we had students rank them from either on a Likert type scale, 1 to 5, as either very negative, right, like terrified, to very positive, like thrilled or elated. And so each word ended up getting an emotional intensity score. The higher the score, the more positive the emotion. And so we have both a kind of qualitative and quantitative way of measuring this dependent variable. The independent variables, there are many of them, one included a bunch of demographics. So things like gender or race or SES, class background, major, things like that, and many more. And then another set of important independent variables were the items that students told us were the most influential to them in choosing a specific career path. So, we would ask, what do you think the number 1 job is you see yourself or hope to be doing 5 years from now? Then what's the number 2 job? What's the number 3 job? But then we would say, okay, think of that number 1 job you hope to be doing. And we gave them a list of 23 different things plus a write-in category and said, which of these was most influential? And they gave us a score of low to high. And these different variables included features of the job, like its pay or work flexibility, work environment. There were personal features, like your race or your gender or your passions or your past experiences. There were social network features, the influence of your mom or your dad or a mentor or faculty or friends and peers. And then there were some campus features, coursework, career services, campus organizations, to try and understand at least 2 students, they're self-reporting, to students what were the variables that they said were the most influential in helping them choose. So these are the 3 emotion words. This is a heat map, 7,143 total words that we basically broke into 338 unique words. The size of each square, so the first layer is emotion word 1, then emotion word 2, then emotion word 3. The size of each square represents how many times that word is repeated by different students. The darker red, the more negative the emotion that word was scored as, and the darker blue, the more positive the emotion. So what you immediately see, I know that the text is a little too small, but mainly just look at the colors. You see that there's a lot more red than blue. And so this tells us that most college students are experiencing more negative emotions than positive emotions when it comes to transitioning from college to career. For emotion word 1, Stress and anxiety were the top 2 words, then excited. And then after that, nervous, fear, scared, worried. For emotion word 2, excited was first, but then followed by anxiety, nervous, stressed, fear, scared. And then emotion word 3, excited was also first, and then followed by anxiety and nervous. Another way of looking at this is in this bar chart. So this is the top 15 emotion words that were used. The top 15 words represent 75% of all the words, because as you can imagine, lots and lots of these words were used once or twice. People made up all kinds of creative words to express how they're feeling that nobody else also said. So if we're looking at just the top 15 words, that's 75% of the words. Emotion words 1 through 3 combined. Number 1 word, excited. But right behind that, shell of initial excitement is anxiety, stress, nervous, fear, scared. Then a little more positive, happy and hopeful. Then worried, overwhelmed, confused, sadness, uncertain, determined, and unsure. So of the top 15, only 4 of those words were positive. Now let's look at, so that's the dependent variable. Let's look at how some independent variables interact with it. Was there a difference by race and gender? I'm a sociologist, we always look at these kinds of things. Well, there is, especially with gender. So the emotional intensity score of men was 9.1, of women was 8.7. It's not a very big difference. Now it was statistically significant. That's what this line here tells you. The letter in front tells you the kind of test. T stands for a t-test, F for ANOVA. If you've taken intro to stats, you might recognize some of that. But no matter what test is used, what you're always looking for is that P, which exists in every kind of test. And that's the probability. The probability that the results we got were due, not just due to random chance, but actually because of the variable in question. So a p-value of less than 0.001 is the highest possible statistical probability, indicated by those 3 asterisks. You want a low number, basically subtract it from 100. Another way of saying this would be, I'm 99.9% certain that gap between men and women is due to gender and not to random chance. So high statistical probability, however, does not necessarily mean high magnitude of difference. Very moderate difference, not much of a difference at all, quite frankly, but a high statistical significance that tiny difference was due to gender. And part of that high significance is the large size on the sample. It's easier to get statistical significance with big sample sizes. You see something a little different in race. While there is some variation, the p-value is not less than 0.05. So to subtract that from 100, I'm basically only 75% sure that race is making a difference, which is not high enough to call it statistically significant. The tradition is that you have to be 95% confident or more, or p has to be less than 0.05. So what's this mean? Even though gender was statistically significant and race was not, in either case, there's not a very big variation. So gender and race don't seem to moderate much the emotions that students feel. What about major? This was statistically significant, not at the 0.001 level, but it passed 0.05 and 0.01, so 2 asterisks. We see some variation. The highest emotional intensity towards the job hunt was felt by those in education, social work, business, and health fields. And then compare that with the other end, undeclared, interdisciplinary. And I think it's pretty clear what's happening here. And that is, if you pick a major that is also a career path, you tend to be a little more confident when you're approaching that time of pursuing a job. If you pick a major that is not specifically a career path, it's a traditional discipline, but is not a job per se, then you still have that extra choice. You have to pick a career path, right? So on one hand, you could say, well, maybe it's better to pick a major that is linked to a specific career path. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And that could be great if you know you want to go into that. The challenge is if you're a nursing major that then later decides you don't want to be a nurse, right? Then that's a little trickier. If you pick something that is a discipline, like sociology, which is closer to the bottom, you still have to choose a career path, but a whole range of them are still open to you. So these were the influence variables. What was most influential for students picking specific career paths over others? Number one, the activities of the job. Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? The work activities itself, which I think is a great reason to pick a job. More so than how cool the job title sounds, quite frankly, which was down the list as number 11, job status. Then passion. Do you feel a kind of connection or resonance to that work? Then the work environment and job stability and your personality. And what I like about these top 5 is that 3 of them are about the work itself, and 2 of them are about whether that work connects to you. I think those are actually really good reasons to pick a job. You like the work, and does the work match who you are? Mothers came in slightly more influential than fathers, 8 versus 10, and then it drops off from there. Interestingly, students said that other fellow students were one of the least influential on picking a career path. And then the lowest of all was campus career services, which is a little concerning. On one hand, right, they are the department on campus tasked with helping you in this transition. The students said that they were the least influential. That could be that they're not doing a great job connecting with you or providing the resources you need, or the students are not taking advantage of it or utilizing it to the full capacity that they could. But nevertheless, this is the rank that students gave of how influential these items were. Now, as I mentioned, this was not just quantitative with the survey. We also qualitatively interviewed over 200 people. And here's just a couple quick takeaways. One, about 12% of the respondents had no idea what to pursue. Our interviews were mainly of seniors. So that's a pretty alarming number when you're right on the precipice, the doorstep of needing to get that job. 12% had no idea. And here's a couple of quotes from our interviews. Well, I was hoping that I would learn more about different careers after I graduate, like toward the end. I'm not sure which route I want to take right now. And honestly, I'm not sure what career specifically. That's pretty late in the game not to know, right? Now, very few students end up homeless. You'll find something, but it is probably too big a thing to just leave to chance, right? Now, most students had some idea what they wanted to do, but there was a big variety of uncertainty. So think of it as a continuum in the middle. So there's 12% who have no idea, then a big number with some idea, but really unsure, some idea, but kind of sure, a lot of uncertainty. And then another small batch on the far other side that says, no, they're very certain. They know exactly what they're doing and what they're going after. In the survey, we also asked students, think of that number 1 job you listed that you want 5 or 10 years from now. Now give us a percentage out of 100 of how confident you are that you will get that. Some students were very confident, some not confident at all, but the mean average was about 75% confidence. That's a C in confidence. And that is a little alarming for seniors to be that close to needing to land their career and to not be sure what they want to do. A few more interview responses. So these are from that middle where they have some idea what they want to do, but still quite a bit of uncertainty. And one of the trends we noticed in that group is that even if they kind of knew what they wanted, they were very often feeling very overwhelmed at the process of preparing for the career itself. This first student is looking into a nursing career. And she said, honestly, I try not to think about the future because I used to freak out. I think for everything. Like the biggest obstacle is always myself. I don't know. Even nursing interviews are supposed to be super intense, and I tend to not prepare. Another student headed to law school said, I feel overwhelmed about attending law school because I have no actual idea what I should be doing or how I should be preparing for it. And lastly, this is a little longer, but I thought it was very eloquent of what a lot of students were feeling. This student said, There's so many thoughts in my head right now. What should I do after graduation? What am I supposed to do? You know, since this is my last semester, I'm very excited to be graduating. But what am I supposed to do? Like, it's kind of scary. Oh, I applied for this job, but does the hiring agency or hiring manager, are they going to accept me? Are they going to hire me even though I don't have any skills or any talent since I don't have much experience? A lot of places ask for experience. And I feel like this is unfair for a lot of students who are graduating. So this kind of negative feeling is overwhelming. All the time you think about it, even before you sleep. You get up and you're like, okay, it's going to be fine. But to be honest with you, reality is reality, and we'll see how it goes. So there very much is this kind of disconcerting feeling of not being adequately prepared, not sure if they're doing enough, and in many cases, sort of leaving things to chance or to the last minute. Now this slide, I want to explain what I did here. So there is the dependent variable of how positive or negative the emotions were that students felt, and then all of those influence variables of how students picked their particular career paths. So I ran a Pearson correlation between each one of those influence variables and their emotional intensity. So this bar chart is showing you which influence variables, if a student said it was highly influential in their choosing process, was also correlated with being more, having more positive emotion towards pursuing that career. And number one, this was interesting, is having an acquaintance with the job. If you pick your career path largely because, or is influential to you, that someone who's close to you, maybe a family friend or something, has the job you want, then those students tended to have a higher emotional intensity score towards the job hunt. Very similar to a mentor. So I colored them both blue because I think the same function is happening there. Somebody close to you, somebody that you know, that is directing you toward a specific career path, those students had higher positive emotion when it came to looking for that job after graduating. Second, your personality and your passions. Students who said they were picking careers because it matched who they are, their personality and passions, they also had higher positive emotion toward the job hunt. And I think that's quite significant. One, getting direction from somebody who can help lead the way. And two, picking something that is a fit for your identity, right, for who you are. And then as you go down the list, you see other things that are less correlated with positive emotion. It's actually worth noting only one was negatively correlated. That's your class background. If you're picking a career because you think someone from your class background should pick that career, that was actually correlated with lower emotional, more negative emotion towards the job hunt. And then, once again, we see career services almost at the bottom of that list. So the students who did say career services were highly influential did not feel much better about that career search. So a few key takeaways, just to summarize what you've heard. One, most students have primarily negative emotions towards their future job hunt, and that is true across demographic categories and majors. So, it's a equal opportunity stress that most students feel despite those demographic categories. Two, most students have some idea of what they want to pursue, especially by the time they're nearing graduation, with smaller numbers indicating that they have no idea or are very certain. It is normal to have some idea but still wrestle with a lot of uncertainty. That's what the vast majority of students are experiencing. Three, even students who do have some idea of what they want to pursue experience significant anxiety about whether or not they're preparing correctly or adequately. So just because you have some ideas doesn't mean you feel like you're doing the right steps to get yourself there. Fourth key takeaway, the most influential factors in student career selection were A, factors of the job, so the job activities and environment, job stability, job flexibility, and factors of the individual, passion and personality fit, namely. The demographic ones were lower, right? Your race, your gender, your class background. Also less influential were the campus factors, your classes, campus organizations, career services, as well as social network factors, family and friends and peers. And then fifth, career services appears to be not only one of the most least influential factors in students' career decision, but also the least moderating on their positive emotions towards the job hunt. The last key takeaway, the influence variables most correlated with positive emotions is one, selection of your career path based on a mentor or someone you know with the job, and two, selection based on a match to your personality and passions. So one of the things you can do that will help you have a more positive transition from college to career is try to find somebody that will guide the way for you and point you in the right direction and the steps you should be taking, as well as making that job selection based on something that you think is a good match for who you are, which of course takes some reflection and self-awareness. But even though this mentor item was so highly correlated with a positive emotion towards the job hunt, most students did not say it was highly influential. Only 18.8% of students said that. And quite frankly, that's because most students don't have somebody like that. Almost over 80% did not indicate that they picked their career because of a mentor. So my team and I, yes, we were doing this study as an academic project. We plan to publish journal articles and do research presentations like this one. But we also wanted to create some resources for students after identifying some of the key factors that we think could help. And so this is the last slide to share with you some of the things we've been working on all summer to prepare. So we keep these resources at laborlab.com. One is an online course called Career Clarity. In this course, there's a series of exercises that help students identify their interests, their skills, and their work values, and then it matches those to specific job titles in U.S. Department of Labor database. So you have concrete job titles, as well as information about the job forecast, outlook, pay ranges, training requirements. And then a final exercise where students research those specific job titles to learn more about the day-to-day tasks and if it's a good match for them. And then they make a short list of 5 very concrete titles. So the hope of this course is that it allows students to have more clarity in what they want to pursue rather than just kind of vague ideas. And definitely to help those students who have no idea. But even those who have some idea, it should help things become much more concrete. Second is a curated library of tutorials called Professionalization Tactics. It's small right now, but we'll be growing it regularly. And what we realized for a lot of students is when they decide it's time to start preparing, you're like, oh, how do I write a resume? How do I prepare for an interview? How do I get an internship, right? They'll Google, and then they realize there's a maze of massive amounts of information, some geared towards people in different stages of their careers, some of varying quality. So what we were trying to do is curate the best tutorials that exist across the web, specifically tailored for college students, making the college to career transition. And then lastly, Labor Lab Academy, which is an online coaching community where I'll be doing a monthly coaching call to talk about some aspect of the college to career transition. There's a monthly challenge to the community, something around, writing a resume or making a LinkedIn profile or prepping for an interview or researching a job you're interested in. And then as you do them, we've gamified it to make it kind of fun. There's points and leaderboards and competitions. And then, of course, just the peer-to-peer network. You can find other people pursuing things that you're interested in. You can find other students who are struggling or can be encouraging based on the things you're experiencing. Hope it's helpful to you. I said I'd open it up to Q&A, particularly around the research component. So I'd love to field a few questions if you have them. Just raise your hand and I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yeah?
You're going to ask these same people questions in the future? You're talking about something like that in class ago.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions I asked. This presentation doesn't go into everything, right? But one of the questions was about their ability to, we want to know how good students are at predicting their future. And so we asked them to list their number one job, second favorite job, third favorite job, tell us why they're excited about it, what challenges they think there are, and then to give us a percentage chance that they think they'll land that number one job. Then the plan is to wait at least more than 5 years after graduation, so 5 to 10 years from now, and then try to hunt most of them down. Hopefully they're on LinkedIn or some other way, and then look at LinkedIn and see what jobs they've had and currently have, and then try to see if different demographic groups or majors, what allows some students to have higher predictive ability of their future than others. I imagine if you're a nursing major about to graduate and you think you're going to be a nurse in 5 years, probably a pretty high chance you could be. I don't know how predictive we can be on careers. Certainly life just happens to us, and a lot of people later in their careers kind of got there on accident. And so I want to understand that. How much of a role should we just be open to opportunity versus intentionally trying to make things happen? And I think there's a balance, but good memory that I mentioned that. So I won't know that for about 5 to 10 years, so get back to me. Another question? Yeah?
Was it just San Diego State students you surveyed, or all different?
Yeah, so this study was on San Diego State specifically. So almost 2,500 surveys and over 200 interviews for students here. Mostly juniors and seniors in 400 level classes, but there was some freshmen and sophomores.
I was just curious, what sparked your interest in this topic? Why focus on college and career transition?
Yeah, well, every sociologist has to pick a niche to try to become an expert in, right? You can't be an expert in everything. All of my work has been at the intersection of the sociology of higher ed and occupations and work. And so I've done different projects and published different things in that space. But over time, and where my main job is as a teacher, I'm interacting with students. Most of you are here, A, because you want enrichment and the college experience, but B, most of you are also here because you're hoping you'll get a better job on the other side. But you probably see in the media that there's a lot of questioning and skepticism, is the ROI, the return on investment of college, worth it? And the answer to that is yes and no, because there's different qualities of college experience and different preparation levels for the careers people pursue. And so just in interacting with students and seeing their anxieties, I decided that this was what I wanted to probably spend the next several years working on, and that is understanding more about and then helping students transition from college to career. And especially being a sociologist, I see soc majors who, like I mentioned before, some majors kill two birds with one stone. You pick a major and a career path, right? Social work or something, nursing. But some majors, you've only picked an academic discipline. You still have to pick a career path. And a lot of students don't do that until the very end. And that just makes it a lot more stressful and probably impacts the quality of job you get, which is another thing I want to find out. If we can mentor people through their college years, do they end up actually getting higher pay or more job satisfaction later? But once again, that'll be a longitudinal project. Take a couple more. Yeah.
How long did the study take you?
For this, we've been collecting data for over 2 years, and then analyzing it took all summer. And so this is the very first, sneak peek, if you will, at some of the findings in it. And so I'll spend the next couple of years trying to publish and present the work. Research is long, right? It's not just, you might take a research class, you get an assignment, you have to do it in a semester, but professional researchers take several years often, from data collection, data cleaning, analysis, writing, fine-tuning, publication. Yeah.
Hypothetically, if you were to reach the conclusion that basically the students, their predictions for their career success and whatnot are inaccurate, what sort of implications would that conclusion have?
Great. So he's saying we call this the so what question. So say I find in the longitudinal thing that students can't predict, or can, either way, right? So what? Well, I think that there's two pieces to that. One, I assume there's variation in predictive ability by group. So is it major, is it race, is it gender, is it class, is it some other, maybe having a mentor, maybe, I don't know. So what I want to do is see if I can find variables that make prediction more likely, because then the so what is, okay, here are interventions or ways we can make prediction more possible. But if we say we find out that like nobody can predict the future, right? Well, then there's still an implication, right? Like maybe it's some kind of just staying open to opportunities and flexible as they come. We know that the job environment is changing very rapidly. So it is highly possible that few of us can predict our future, because maybe most of the jobs you're thinking of won't exist and other versions will. But yeah, so those are the reasons. So try to see if we can help people predict with more accuracy, or have strategies to navigate even if they can't predict. Let's go with one last one. Yep.
Did you have a hypothesis, and how did it compare to your findings?
So in this case, I'm using what's called grounded theory. So it's more inductive. I did not have a hypothesis going in. I'm trying to develop hypothesis coming out. So it's the kind of research where you're flexible to change. So the first semester or two was pilot data. We changed the questions we were asking once we realized we weren't getting things that make sense to people. But in inductive theory, or inductive approaches, grounded theory specifically, you let the data speak. So in traditional scientific method, you start with a hypothesis, right? The forest, then you go into the trees, collect the data. But in inductive approaches, that's reversed. So you start with the trees, the data itself, and then later try to explain the shape of the forest. So my hypotheses are going to be coming soon out of this, rather than shaping the study going in. So it's more exploratory at the beginning.
And what about previous research?
In this area?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of literature on different aspects of emotions, the college to career transition. But let me get clarity on the question exactly. What about? I mean, yes, there is literature on it.
Yeah, I guess since there was no hypothesis, like what previous research was guiding kind of your questions.
Right.
So maybe just a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we've been reading literature, but again, that is one of the differences between inductive and deductive research, is that you let the data speak, and then you're going through the literature iteratively throughout the whole process, but especially at the end, because you're saying, okay, here are the findings, what does this either connect to or challenge, or you just propose something alternative if you don't see something in the literature that exists. So there are some studies that would predict some of these things, that students, there's a lot of stuff on mental health in college students. So the kind of anxiety is very much prominent in the literature. I was not surprised to find that students feel it more negative than positive. But I wanted to try to break down into what exact emotions, I called it the emotional palette. Like, we all know it's exciting and scary, but what are the real colors? And then the intensity, and then the diversity of a demographic variation. I was very surprised to find one of my personal hypotheses was that race, class, and gender would be much more predictive, being a sociologist. So it's interesting to see that the intensity of the negative emotion exists across category. Okay, where are we at on time? I'll wrap up there. I'll hang out around here if you have any additional questions. Thank you very much.